everybody. Live stream starting. Welcome to the live stream.
I don't see it on my screen.
It's okay. There's latency.
All right. Oh, we're getting off to a fantastic start. All right. First, I'd like to say hi, everyone. Welcome to our very first .NET, Baton Rouge.NET and SQL Server live stream. I will be your host for this evening. My name is Brian McCoy. I run the .NET side of things for our Baton Rouge user group. We also have William Assaf, who runs our SQL Server side, and we have a special guest from the Analytics group, Andy Parkerson, who you'll be hearing from later. First off, I'd like to thank everybody for coming. Please feel free to utilize the YouTube chat for any questions or comments you have. We'll be happy to relay those to the speakers to make sure everybody has an opportunity to participate. We also have links to our Discord server below. So if you'd like to continue the conversation after this stream is over with, you can get access to all of us there and participate in local discussion about what's happening in the Baton Rouge tech scene. Oh, what else? In our openings, we like to discuss some upcoming events that are happening around here. I know this weekend we have Houston Tech Fest, which is a virtual event. If you're interested in that, you can check out our Discord for more information. We'll be happy to provide you with links in order for you to get some additional tech training free of cost. It's always a good event. One other thing I'd like to mention is we are a local user group, and we are always open for and looking for speakers. So if you want to start your YouTube streaming career, you can reach out to us, let us know. We will help you with that. We will be more than happy to give you the stage and let you utilize the technology that we have available to us to help facilitate and starting your future career as a YouTube streamer. Let's see, whatever. We, of course, have our meetup. I don't think we have a link for that. I'm going to have to get that for...
check our website.
We can check our websites. They'll be there, or you can search for the Baton Rouge SQL Server and .NET user groups on Meetup and find us there. We announce all of our upcoming meetings and send out email blasts to keep you engaged with what we're doing in the community. I know we have taken a bit of a hiatus, but we are now venturing forth into the virtual area, hopefully to make a stamp and produce some quality content for all of our user group attendees. Let's see, what else do we have? We always like to give people the floor. If you are hiring or if you are looking for a job, please feel free to use the YouTube chat to links to whatever job boards you have or networking. We are trying to facilitate networking as best we can. That is why we were here. That is what we want to do. You can also join our Discord group. We'd be happy to hand out whatever resources we have. And let's see, in just a few moments, we'll go ahead and get the talk started. First, I'd like to introduce Bedford. He has put in hours and hours of work to help make what we are doing now possible as far as the live stream on YouTube. He will also be our producer for the night. So if anything goes wrong, please blame him in the chat. We want to give credit where it is due always. And again, I want to thank everyone for coming out or staying in or whatever you're doing, sitting in front of your computer. It is great to have you here with us. Without further ado, I will introduce our very own William Assaf. He will be talking about new Azure certifications for DBAs, devs, and analysts.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody, and welcome to the first virtual user groups meeting. Just want to do a quick audio check. Are we displaying all good, Bedford? Thumbs up.
We're all good.
All right. Today's presentation, quick presentation from 5 speakers. I will be your first speaker. It's on the new Microsoft certifications, especially those around Azure. Real quick, just about PASS. So we're here for the Baton Rouge.NET group and the Baton Rouge SQL Server group. Baton Rouge SQL Server group is an official chapter of the Professional Association for SQL Server. They have a big virtual summit. There's usually a summit in Seattle. This year, it is all online, and it's actually much cheaper to attend now. If you want to register for it, there's actually a $50 discount code you can use right here that is special to the Baton Rouge SQL Server user group. If you haven't registered yet, go ahead and register with this code now. It's in the first week of November. It's the Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. The same speakers, same quality of speakers from all over the world are going to be speaking on the same topics. If you've ever been to Pass Summit before in Seattle, it was supposed to be in Houston, but then all this happened. Okay, so let's talk about certification exams. Some statistics from both Microsoft and CompTIA talking about how employees who are certified are more productive, they respond better, they have better careers, they're better respected by employers. Does certification make you a better database administrator? No, and I'm not implying causation here, but the process of preparing for an exam, the preparation of the materials, the mindset that led you to the self-improvement path of a certification exam, those are all productive, causative, and beneficial for your career and your employer. So good for you for attending tonight's session and probably feeling the need maybe to get certified. A final note is that I'd say that becoming certified does make your skill set broader, more aware, better at choosing right solutions among all the different solutions and features that are possible for the right problem. So today, in the short time I have available, I aim to answer 3 questions. What have they done to my MCSD, MCSE, MCSA? What path of cert exams do I have now? And how am I supposed to take an exam with all this going on? So first, what have they done with the MCSD, MCSE, and MCSA? If it starts with a 70, that exam is almost certainly retired or will be retired by January of this year, of this upcoming year, 2021. That deadline was actually moved back 6 months. They probably should have already been retired, but because of COVID, they extended the old exams out. This includes all the exams associated with the old MCSA, MCSD, and MCSE certifications, though those certifications themselves, if you earned them, will remain on your official Microsoft transcript until no later than June of 2022. Over the past few years, exams starting with letters like AZ or DP or AI, we're going to talk about some of those, for example. Those are the newer exams you're looking for. The older exams that started with numbers, we've had all along, those were technology or platform based. Now, Microsoft exams, and they kind of been trending in this direction for a while, are more role based. So there will not be a Windows Server 2019 certification or exam. There will not be a SQL Server 2019 certification or exam. Because those are for products. Instead, there will be exams focusing on roles like solutions architect, enterprise administrator, Azure data engineer, Azure developer, functional consultant. We'll talk about that one. These roles are expected to have broad experience with all the relevant features and products. So second question, what path should you get on? So AZ 900 is a fundamentals level exam. All the 900 exams are, which means it's geared toward people entering the technology, even if they have years of technical experience with other Microsoft products already. I took AZ 900, for example, and in the process, I learned a lot about features and solutions available outside of the products that I was already using in Azure that I typically worked in. So think of Azure as an entire new ecosystem to work in. A lot of the stuff is familiar. AZ 900 is the perfect introduction for everyone, whether you're a developer, a sysadmin, a DBA, a support technician, or a manager of any of those folks. When you go to the website for AZ 900, you get all the links you need to get started right away, including how to register for the exam, paid training or practice exams. But before you go and pay for training, there is a lot of free stuff. Many exams on Microsoft Learn's website also include free self-driven learning content. These free learning paths are also available for many cert exams right now to guide you through the entire exam syllabus, which is also available. We're going to talk about that. With product info, with sample questions for you to review, important differences, infographics, even some of them have free Azure time via temporary sandboxes that they spin up in browser that let you create the actual services and servers in Azure in the browser. You do not have to spend a dime of your own money training yourself on Azure certification exams. Microsoft provides all that for you. I personally use the training paths plus my own experience to pass AZ 900. And in my opinion, I found that the Microsoft learning paths were faster and more focused than some of the video series offerings in the Microsoft, in the massive open online, or the MOOCs, the MOOC platforms. Curious what is on each exam? Straight from Microsoft.com, this is provided in the skills measured section of an exam's website. This is what's called the domain. This domain is determined by a group of subject matter experts, by the way, before item writing begins, and it's validated by their real life experience in the field. You know going into the exam how much will be on each topic, the specific topics covered, so there are no surprises. And by the way, if you're wondering why all of my screenshots were so dark, it's because the Microsoft Docs website now has this built-in dark theme that you can enable. If you scroll all the way down to the bottom in the bottom left-hand corner, click dark and enjoy. So the Browse Certs and Exams page on Microsoft Learning's website allows you to search for exams or search by technical topic, like Azure SQL Database, or Cosmos DB, or Event Hubs, or Containers, or SharePoint Online. It's easy to decide what to focus on next. You can also search by job role and job level. But let's go over some of the exams for roles that are for people probably watching this presentation tonight with the user groups. So for those of you, I got some awesome images showing up too early in my animations. For you developers who work in Azure, the certification you're going to start with is AZ204. A full third of this exam is just connecting to and using Azure services, but there's also content on the various server and serverless compute options, security, storage, and monitoring. It tests what you need to know, for example, to connect various services together to deploy an app on a VM or in an Azure App Service. After AZ204, you can go into the Solutions Architect and DevOps paths. So with that prerequisite out of the way, you're ready to move on to other Azure certs, and you have a choice here. For developers, you can go Solutions Architect or DevOps Engineer. There's a free learning pathway content for all of these exams, including sample questions available on the website. For AZ400, for example, AZ400 covers container architecture, instrumentation, security and compliance, source control, collaboration, and continuous integration, all in the Azure ecosystem, as well as delivery and release management. And if you're working in the Internet of Things space, there's an Azure certification for that too, including the Azure IoT service, as well as edge design, networking, debugging, and security. Note that these Azure Dev exams aren't exactly new. In fact, a couple of the architect role Azure Cert exams will retire this September, including exams I haven't listed here, AZ300 and AZ301. So those have already been introduced and cycled out and replaced by AZ303 and AZ304. So don't go studying for AZ300 or 301. Go ahead and move up to the new ones that aren't expiring at the end of this month. And there's a lot more roles to come. They're still releasing exams right now. We're in this really neat phase where cert exams are popping up for new roles and products. In fact, when new Microsoft certification exams first come out, they're available to take super cheap. They actually used to be free, but now they're like 15 or 20 bucks. They're available super cheap in beta format. So it's relatively risk-free to take a cert exam on emerging technology. The only catch is that you don't find out if you pass the exam for a couple months. Beta exams count if you pass them once they go live. If you don't pass them, you can retake it just like anything else once it goes live, just as you would normally. Beta exams are usually limited to a few hundred candidates in English-speaking countries only. Watch the Microsoft Learn blog for beta exam announcements. They're usually posted by Liberty Munson. You see here, Microsoft's longtime cert exam psychometrician. It's her actual job title. It's pretty cool. For example, here's the announcement for a beta exam for DP900 in early June, along with a code that worked for the first 300 candidates to register for the exam. I got into the beta for cheap. I took it. I didn't get my results for 2 months later, but that was pretty cool, and it was super cheap. So if you're a developer interested in data, or if you're a database administrator, or a data analyst, or an AI and machine learning analyst, or anything that works with data in Azure, really, then DP900 is the starting point for you. This exam is now out of beta. It costs just $99 to take. It's a fundamentals level exam, because it's a 900, that covers all the basic and current offerings in Azure for data. It covers both relational and non-relational offerings. So that's both SQL and NoSQL, analytical workloads, and all the core concepts of storage and security surrounding them. Fundamental level exams like AZ900 and DP900 are great for learners in Azure and for broad categories of job descriptions. For example, I'm getting everyone on my team of DBAs and data analysts to take both AZ900 and DP900. It's a great foundation for working in Azure so that we all know what's possible. But the 900 exams don't really count toward a certification badge. So when you get to doing enough of the work, then DP200 and DP201 come in. These are for implementing Azure data solutions, including relational and non-relational data options and all the options for ELT and ETL. But also the platforms like Cosmos DB, Azure SQL Database, Azure Synapse Analytics, the data lake storage, the data factory, which Andy's going to talk about later, Azure Stream Analytics, Azure Databricks, and Azure Blob Storage. These are all part of a modern data warehouse, for example. There's also a track for folks who spend more time administering, securing, configuring, tuning, automating, and monitoring data platforms in Azure, like the 3 Azure offerings for SQL Server in a VM, the managed instance, or the Azure SQL DB. Also including non-Microsoft products like Azure SQL Database for MySQL and Azure Database for PostgreSQL or PostgreSQL, depending on how you say it. DP300 just came out of beta like this month and is the clearest possible path for existing SQL DBAs into a new Azure SQL certification. So for data science professionals, there are a couple paths, starting with the AI 900 fundamentals exam, which is directly for folks entering AI, even if they're entering it without any technical background, with no data science or software engineering experience is required. It tests common machine learning and AI workloads, how to implement them on Azure, and yes, it comes with a free 5-part learning pathway right there on the website for AI 900. Then DP100 is the first and only Azure exam out right now for data science, but it tests machine learning workloads running in Azure, developing and deploying models, especially in the machine learning service. And then AI engineers can take AI 100, which certifies the various AI solutions and APIs involving natural language processing. For example, what's putting the closed captions at the bottom of my PowerPoint screen right now is the Microsoft Cognitive Services API, the Azure Bot Service, the Azure Cognitive Services, and also data storage in Azure. And then finally, for Power Platform developers, I know some developers are branching into that aspect of it. Some of these exams are out. Some of these are in beta. Some have only been announced and will be released at the end of September for those of you who develop applications, integrations, process automations in the Power Platform. And if you're not aware, Microsoft really defines a role difference between developer and what they call a functional consultant. You're probably going to see more of this in the future. So a functional consultant role has product-specific expertise, but also business consulting. And even inside corporations, without working for a consulting company, inside a corporation as an employee of that corporation, a functional consultant talks in common language with both the business side and IT. So they have created different certification paths for both developers and functional consultants in the Power Platform, the latter of which needs to know the capabilities of the platform in order to advise both developers and the business. Again, all the new Microsoft certification exams are role-based, not technology-based, and functional consultant is that role specifically. So I'm not going to talk tonight, but I have limited time. But there are also exams for some Microsoft-specific platforms like Dynamics 365 and SAP workloads. And obviously a lot of exams for Azure infrastructure that we haven't talked about today. So last question, and then I'll wrap up. You're wondering, with a pandemic, with hurricanes, and between hiding under my covers, how do I take a Microsoft certification exam? So thankfully, Pearson VUE and Microsoft have already offered some online proctored exams. And now they are expanding this offering's availability because many testing centers have closed. It's a live proctored exam, which means you are taking an exam at your home or your office on your computer with someone actively watching you via your webcam and listening to you via your computer. In fact, this whole process is easiest if you are taking the exam on a laptop with a built-in webcam. No hardware needed. They, for the most part, work fine technically, though they are unforgiving. So I have taken 3 online exams since the pandemic started. Each time I took the exam, they had new security requirements that were added and that were becoming more and more strict as they were looking for more things. For example, you have to take pictures of your testing area. So again, it's good to have a mobile camera or a laptop that you're literally moving around. From all angles, including the floor and ceiling, your ears and your glasses. You have to cover any screens around you 360 degrees, erase any whiteboards, close any window blinds. And so this whole remote inspection that they do of your testing area may take up to a half an hour. So make sure to log on to your exam early to give yourself plenty of time to go through their security process, and also use the same web browser throughout. I recommend Chrome. There are stories of people walking through the room behind you or hearing a distant voice even, and then the remote monitor fails your exam with no refund. Unforgiving. You are warned about this ahead of time pretty clearly. So make sure you're taking your online proctored exam in a place where no one can be seen or heard, including your kids. I put a sock on my home office door and told my wife and my college kid, who's stuck at home now, to not make any noise or enter the room for a couple hours. That is what is necessary. So honestly, it's worked pretty well for me. I'm 3 for 3 so far. My boss had issues with his browser and lost his exam slot and then had to fight for a refund. So even after this pandemic passes, I might still continue to use the online proctoring just because it saves a bunch of hassle and travel. For me, it worked well. Here's some of the links that I used to make this presentation. Please support your local STEM initiatives. Here's a STEM education nonprofit that's local to me that I volunteer for. Please reach out and share your knowledge with the next generation, especially with folks in your community that are needing to find new careers during the pandemic. The Futures Fund in Baton Rouge and Dallas is an organization I volunteer for and care a lot about. They are actually hiring right now contract part-time web developers to assist and develop online training modules for youth and adult education. So if you're interested in a side hustle for your web dev skills, let me know or go to this link that you see right here for the Walls Project or the Baton Rouge Futures Fund. Here's a book I wrote for Microsoft. Here's a little bit about me. I'm going to post these slides at my blog right there. You see SQLTac.com. Thank you very much and enjoy the rest of tonight's user group meeting.
Awesome. Thank you, William. Always a fantastic presenter. And speaking of getting involved, the Futures Fund is a great, I've had the pleasure of meeting some of the people who've come out of there and work with them. It is an amazing organization. If you'd like to get involved, again, as I mentioned earlier, please, join us in Discord, join us in the YouTube chat, drop us a line. We'll be happy to extend whatever resources we have to you. So next, I may actually have to call a little bit of an audible and ask Ryan Richard to get ready, if that's okay. Ryan will be presenting on running PWAs in standalone mode on mobile devices. So as he gets that set up, please feel free to interact with us in the chat. Again, Discord is available, and I will step back and.
Okay, I just want one person to confirm that you can see my content and can hear me.
I can.
Okay, good enough. So, so my presentation, this looks like a fancy term and everything, but really what I'm going to talk about is running a web app on a mobile device in standalone mode. And what I mean by that is you will see the web app will run outside of the browser frame and will appear very close to a native mobile app. And so the experience is such that you will kind of forget that you're looking at a web app, and it'll appear more like a mobile app. And PWA is just a fancy term for a type of web app that we'll talk about in the presentation, which is a requirement for making your web app. You can't just use any web app. It has to be a PWA web app. Okay, so a little bit about me. I'm a software developer here in Baton Rouge. I mainly do contract and freelance work. If you want to get in touch with me, there's my email address, ryanrichard72@hotmail.com. And I do most of my contract work for a company called Antares, which is a software company, mainly a custom software company here in Baton Rouge. So if you have any needs, larger scale projects, feel free to reach out to them. Okay, so what are we talking about here? Let me talk about the second and third bullet points here. Let's say you need to write an app for a mobile device, and you're just trying to decide, do you want to write a native mobile app to run on Android or iOS, or do you want to just write a web app that can run on the browser and won't be restricted per se, by the mobile operating system? So in the past, the decision may have come down to, okay, the look and feel. I don't want it to feel like a web app or a website. I want it to feel more like a mobile app, native mobile app. So now with this ability that you can now run a web app outside of the browser on your mobile device, it gets you a little bit closer to that look and feel of a native mobile app. So again, the third bullet point, evaluate. What's your determining factor here? Do you have a skill set in native mobile app development, or is your skill set in web app development? That could be a deciding factor. Or do you want to write an app once and throw it on the internet on a web app server and then just be able to access it anywhere? So those are the things you need to consider. And so what I'm going to show you is that running a web app outside of the browser gets you closer to that native experience. And if that's where your skill set is, or if you want to save money, or if you don't want to deal with publishing to app stores, then you can go that route. Okay, so in terms of the look and feel, you also get the benefit of a shortcut on the home screen, or wherever you want to put it. So you don't have to open the browser. You can just click on this shortcut, and it'll open up your app without the browser around it, and you can get to it directly. You don't have to type in the URL every time. Also, the last bullet point, you get this benefit of making your web app accessible offline. What I mean by that is, let's say you don't have internet connectivity on your mobile device. If you've installed your PWA web app, if you've installed it to the desktop or to the home screen, and you don't have internet connectivity, you can still it'll still run. Actually, if you open it up in the browser and you don't have internet connectivity on your mobile device, the website will still appear to come up. Now, you may not get data if you need to talk to Web API, but you can still run the app. So the PWA, let me skip now to more details about PWA. So PWA is Progressive Web App. And basically that's just a scenario for where web apps are going, where they look and feel more like that native installed experience that you get with a mobile app. And they also give you the benefit, as I just said, of giving you an offline capability where your web pages can still be served up, and potentially your data can be served up if you take advantage of some of the local storage that you can do through your browser, which is another topic, but something it's tied in very closely with these concepts. Okay, so your website's going to have to be hosted under HTTPS. That's a requirement. The app manifest is a JSON config file that you publish with your web app that gives information about the web app so that your browser can know how to install it and serve it up. Service worker is just a fancy term for a script that your website installs into the browser literally, and the script will run sort of on its own outside of your website, and it can actually serve up the content of your website and potentially data if you're offline. So the script can function without even your website being accessible because it's installed into the browser local cache. Okay, I use Angular for this app. The PWA technology is baked into Angular, so you don't have to do anything extra. It's built in. It's pretty easy to roll out, but it's nothing proprietary about Angular. You can do it just in direct JavaScript. You can do all of what you need to do. So you don't need the Angular piece. Okay, so I'm going to demo an app called Fleet Manager that I wrote in Angular that is used to manage a fleet of vehicles. I'm going to show you two things in the code real quick. Where the app manifest, that's a requirement, and we have to have that. And then the service worker has to be installed via your code. So I'm going to switch over to VS Code here. And again, this is Angular, so if you're not familiar with Angular, don't let it scare you too much. Here's the index file, which basically almost every website has that as your launching point. And here's the manifest. So right here, we have a link to the manifest.json. And in our code, source code, our manifest is just a config file. So we need that. And then we also need to install the service worker, which is done here in the app module. Again, this is deep into Angular, but this code runs when your app launches, and this will install the service worker into your browser. Okay, so let's run a real demo here. And pardon me while I find Chrome here. Ha. Okay, so I'm going to open the Fleet Manager app. You can see here it's in Azure. And it comes up here. And now let me very quickly switch into the dev tools. And you can see here that the browser here, DevTools, are picking up the manifest file, which tells us about our app. And it's also picking up the service worker. So those are the two requirements. The browser sees that, and so it should be happy. So now what I'm going to do, now use your imagination here. Pretend we're on a mobile device because the process is exactly the same. I'm going to hit this button and say install Fleet Manager. So when I do this, there'll be a little confirmation here to install this, and it's going to install it, and it's probably going to pop it open immediately. There it is. Now I can close my browser. And again, pretend, if you can, that we're on a mobile device. So now the app is running, and this is a website, and it's running. I'm going to log in here, and it's running outside of the browser. So pretend we're on a mobile device, and you don't have all that extra space taken up by the the browser header and bookmark bars and all that stuff. So my web service is sleeping in Azure here, so it may take a second here to log in. But we don't really need to log in. So there we go. Okay, so let me close the app now. And interestingly enough, we're on Windows, obviously. So now the app, the PWA is essentially installed in Windows to some degree. So now I have a shortcut in Windows where I can launch this directly. So again, pretend I actually have a shortcut here, but pretend we're on the a mobile device, and you have your home screen, and here's your icon, and you just double click it and the app opens. So, and one thing to note about this is that if you're designing a PWA here to run outside of the browser, you're not going to get the benefit of the backward and forward arrow or whatever, click to go back on the browser. So what I did is I put my own sort of back button here to be able to navigate back. So again, you'll notice here the app is you don't forget that it's a web app, but you sort of get closer to a native installed app. Okay, so that's let me switch back to my thing here that I accidentally closed, and so that's it. So again, it's a pretty neat little feature. I kind of stumbled onto it by accident. I was actually writing a PWA more for the purpose of doing offline, an app that could work offline and save data offline, and then I just kind of stumbled into this ability. So it really turned out nice because the app, in my opinion, for the client, it looks and it sort of it makes it easier for them to walk around with a tablet and run the app when they're out in the field, which is essentially what they're using it for. So anyway, I thought it was a pretty good, neat little feature, and there's a lot more to it, obviously, but basically that's the main point of it. So that concludes my part.
Awesome. Thanks, Ryan. We appreciate appreciate the info. And
okay, sure.
Anytime you want to talk, let us know. So next, we'll actually have Justin Obney. So Justin, if you want to share your screen.
I think Bedford is turning wrenches in the background. But while that's happening, for the high 30s of you who are active in the YouTube chat, any questions for Ryan? Have any of you used that thing before? Which I don't know because I'm a DBA and I don't know anything about all that stuff.
You do.
If not, we're all good.
I did have a couple.
Oh, we have an inter-speaker question. That's allowed.
Yeah.
That's allowed, right?
How have you started to develop any strategies on, or what are some of the challenges in upgrading? Because I know it does sync and save it. So like if they open it, they technically get a cached version of the app while the new version downloads in the background, right? Have you had to kind of deal with any problems along that?
So here's what happens, and again, I'm speaking from an Angular perspective because that's what I use for this app and what I do most of my work in. But it could probably be done pretty easily otherwise. So with the Angular implementation, Angular does some stuff in the background with regard to that app manifest and that the service worker, such that when you do an Angular build and you publish the web app up to its server, what will happen, and then you go to a client machine and you launch the app, and therefore it kicks off the service worker. The service worker will, again, this is Angular, but the service worker will automatically go to the web app behind the scenes, the web server, and it checks some kind of, not a timestamp, but some sort of thing that identifies a version. And again, you don't have to do anything. The service worker sees that a new version of a new build, if you will, is on the website. So it will automatically pull down all of the new files that it needs, and you have to manually tap into that, and you can tell the user, hey, I just pulled down a new version of the app. Close the browser or close the standalone and reopen it, and you get the new version.
Gotcha.
So it's baked into the Angular implementation, but it's probably part of the base operation of the service worker.
Okay. Yeah. That's just one of the challenges I'd read about, but I hadn't really done too much.
It works great. You basically update the web server, and the client out there will automatically update itself. You don't have to do anything.
Nice. Wonderful.
Yep.
All right. Well, any other questions? I think Bedford's good to go. So call Bedford out one more time, our wonderful publisher in chief. So
everything's good here.
All right. Without further ado, Justin Obney will be presenting on API-driven TypeScript, CodeGen, and whatnot.
Also known as how Microsoft slowly lured me into C#.
There you go. All right. Take it away.
Justin Obney. I have a growing consultant company here in Baton Rouge. I think we're about 11 strong now. So kind of growing on software, mobile apps, things like that. One of our clients, Block, is a Baton Rouge startup. They've kind of pivoted to another thing called Check, and so we kind of help them get Block off the ground. So in doing a lot of the consultant work, kind of one of the challenges that we face is really kind of moving fast. And one of the biggest places where we would hit snags is keeping the API in line with our front end. So this is, for some people, old news, for some people, new, and it's just it's our little stopgap into kind of going where Blazor's probably going to end up taking us. So there's a specification called Open API that just allows you to describe your APIs, and it kind of gives you everything you need to know about talking to an API. And with that specification, it's automatically built into a lot of languages, and it generates everything you need to know about those interactions. And so what we've kind of worked with was we found some tools in the open source community that really helps us tap into that and auto-generate a lot of our front-end code from that. In C# and .NET, the most popular tool is called Swashbuckle, and you'll kind of see it manifest itself in what they call Swagger. And so what our goal is to allow us to make changes at our API, run a command, and immediately know what's broken in our front end. So the underlying piece, and I apologize if I'm kind of scatterbrained. Running that, our company's been growing, so that's kind of a lot of work we've been running through, and so it keeps me kind of stretched. So when you look at that Swagger file, what you end up with is something that tells you, hey, you can call a URL. It kind of gives you a name of what you're trying to do, and it tells you what kind of information you need to send to the browser. And then pick the terrible one. I think a better one would have been the Git. There we go. Here we go. So let's look at this for a second. When we have a user that we're trying to create, we can send a user, and we have all this information about what we're gonna need to send to create that user. So what we've been able to do is essentially tap in to this, run one command, which I don't know if you can see my terminal. Yarn CodeGen, and automatically generate our entire service for all interactions to our browsers. And so what this means is that when anything changes, we get a fresh start. So if you look at our user service, which is kind of the corresponding piece to this user right here, you'll see we have a create, which is this blue piece that we have right here, this green piece. We can see that it takes a create user request. The part about that is if we go to our backend, you can see that's actually being built from right here in our command, this create user request. And you can see that it's going to return a promise of a response of a user get DTO. And you can see that response of a user get DTO is right here in my controller. Everything that crosses the API boundary gets automatically code generated. So what this means for us is that we never have to write code twice that's going to go across that boundary. No matter how far nested down that chain it is, it's going to get auto-generated. So if we go into our create user request real quick, we can see that it actually is an excuse our kind of our architecture here, but it's like a request of a user get DTO, and that comes down to a user get. We have a bunch of inherited stuff happening. Similarly, if we go to our TypeScript, we can see there's actually a generated user get DTO for us, and it's got all those properties typed as well. So this file that I'm in right here is something that we would never touch by hand because it's auto-generated. But where we really get to see it pay off in dividends is on our front end, we have our new user form. So we have our first name, our last name, our email address, and whatnot. So when we go here, we are able to have our form for our create. This is just some React code in JavaScript or TypeScript more accurately. And we get to pull in this user service, which is auto-generated for us, and we get to have a create method. And the ability to do is get this type safety out of the box. So if I just put an empty object right here, it's going to say, hey, you're missing claims, address, value, name, last name, and role. So we get wonderful IntelliSense with no work on our part from the front end. Additionally, when we're doing things like our tables and our listing pages, this is another place where we found ourselves like, okay, a lot of this information is just already known on the back end. So how can we kind of improve that as well? So if we kind of come back to our Swagger, we can see that when we get a user, it has a lot of properties. We have our pagination information right here. What page are you on? How many do you want to search? What fields do you want to search? And we have a couple extra properties like claims and roles. And we'll see that we get a model back of this crazy thing here. But ultimately, it all drills down to this user summary, which has a couple properties on it. ID, email, first name, last name. So with spending a little bit of time with our Swagger and our TypeScript, once we run that command, we were able to kind of build a little form library to sit on top of our Swagger generated types. So if I kind of go to this get all, there's not too much special about this get all other than it sees hey, it takes in all these parameters that you see, and it returns us a response of an advanced query page of a user summary DTO. So just to kind of hammer home just how much that auto generation takes care of us, we can see that our get all has this response of an advanced query page of a user summary DTO. And these generics come all the way across our boundary as well, and really allow us to have the type safety even at the generic level in TypeScript. So additionally, because we have that type safety, we get a bunch of other really cool features. So when we're kind of like building out a table like this, we have the ability to kind of define columns. And not only can we define columns, we get type safety in our columns as well. Even though that's a string, it knows that that string is not one of the properties that's going to come back from this function. And all I had to do was just give it this function itself, and then TypeScript's inference took over, more so I can even get IntelliSense on what I have access to. And that was just one of the coolest things ever, is if I were to go in the code, change it from email address to just email, and run my CodeGen again, I immediately know everywhere that broke. And when you start building really large apps, that becomes super important, and it kind of acts as a trade-off for writing unit tests. Additionally, we can kind of use that where if you're going to do something a little fancier than just putting a string there, you can just say, okay, well, I'm actually going to just give you a function. And in that function, it's really no different. You have access to all the properties are going to come back. And that is absolutely no code written by hand on the TypeScript side to get that IntelliSense. Simply using a function that's auto-generated based off of the swagger that comes from the API, we get all of that IntelliSense. And we can even do things like we can use that same IntelliSense down here to say, what can you search by? And actually going to give you all the properties that you have access to and make sure the same thing right here, kind of you get all this IntelliSense everywhere. And more than just the IntelliSense, I can kind of go in and show that real quick. Is if I go to my user and I just rename my summary property to roles. Let's not do. And I just save that. My server is restarting real quick. And I'm going to run this command one more time. It looks like it is. It's done. And so now we can see we have some problems. So I just like press F8 and it's like, go to these problems, like, hey, role isn't a thing anymore. So I immediately know what is broken in my system. If you're kind of running like a little terminal, you get kind of, hey, this field right here is no longer valid because it's no longer a thing. One of the other benefits of doing that was that we got a lot more insight into kind of what was going to change. So because we base everything off of that swagger, we can kind of see that in that check-in, I'm going to see, hey, my actual API definition now changed, and the generated functions changed, And thus I kind of needed to change some other information about that as well. So for someone like me that started out in JavaScript and really was not for the type safety, not really not for it, but really didn't see a usefulness of it, kind of really getting into these tools that took care of a lot of that for me, produce a lot of value. We're not doing anything too special. We're just using a couple tools, like one's called Swagger Axios CodeGen, and that's really what's generating that based off of that. We're stitching together some other stuff in our build script for generating enums in a certain way. But in a nutshell, that's how we're using Swagger to not have to write a lot of front-end code. Any questions or anything I could kind of go into more?
Do we have any questions from chat? Feel free to post any questions you may have in chat or Discord. We are checking both.
Yeah, I think there's. The only other thing I had was for things that don't use Swagger, we also added the ability to decorate any type with CodeGen and have it automatically cross the boundary as well.
Nice. Leave it to a developer to automate his way out of a job. So. No. All right. Well, if we don't have anything else, thank you, Justin. We appreciate the talk. Be sure to be here next month where Justin will be talking on Visual Studio, PowerShell, C#, Blazor. Why not? Might as well make the full leap, huh? I'm joking. But I don't know if you've ever seen Justin talk before. The second you brought up PowerShell, I was like, who is this guy? Where did he come from? So
necessity, that's where it happens.
I understand. Awesome. All right. So next we will have Anandi Subramanian talking about data analysis, finding the needle in the haystack. So if you want to go ahead and get your screen shared.
Can you see my screen?
We can see your screen, and I see a bunch of. I can hear you, and I see a bunch of unfun SQL stuff. So I imagine this is up William's alley. So go ahead when you're ready.
I already know.
Right. All right. I'm excited to be here because this is my first time at this user group because I'm not from Baton Rouge. I'm from Houston. So if you hear rain outside, excuse me for that. So we've had a lot of technical talk so far. So I figured we'll steer it away and talk a little bit about data analysis. So that's where we are at. So a little bit about me. I work for SparkCount in the analytics team as a principal consultant. As I said, I'm based out of Houston. And if you'd rather type a lot, that's my official email. Otherwise, a shorter one below. So why are we even talking about this? Why are we talking about data analysis and, who cares about it, right? So you heard William talk about a lot of the certifications earlier. And one of the things he talked about was functional consultant. So this is really about, although it's not a purely technical topic, it is about being that functional consultant, being a liaison between business and technical side. And how do you tackle a typical data problem? Data analysis, theoretically, it really means digging deep, mining for data and presenting it. It goes into data science, but we're not getting technical here. We're talking about taking a business problem and how do you transform it into data. And you're all experienced in writing code, you've handled solutions, you've handled issues all the time. But I felt that it'll be good to spend 15 minutes of your time today, because when I was starting out, I was a beginner. Somebody came up with a problem and said, hey, give me a report or, give me some data set. I was very over-enthusiastic about jumping in, diving into my SQL skills and presenting all this data to them. And I realized 25 iterations later, they really didn't mean what they said, or I didn't understand what they said. So it meant a lot of shuffling that SQL query or shuffling that query And what actually came out was quite different from what I started out with. And of course, fast forward, I have juniors in my team, or I'm mentoring some people. They all come across the same thing, right? So they're all very eager to jump in. And what you do need to do, and what experience teaches you, is to step back and understand the problem and a few things. So that's what I'm here to talk about today. So you have a problem statement that a lot of times is a one-liner. So they might just say, give me the sales trend for this year, or how did our dealers do today or this month, and what are our numbers projecting to? What is our sales? I mean, typically this is very, very common where you see wherever you go, you will find some metric jump out about sales. And most of the time, business users are a good 10,000 feet high. They have a vague idea of what they want. I say vague not because they don't know what they want. They do know what they want, but the way they communicate it across, it's got a business hat on it. And when we absorb it from a technology side or from a data side, you interpret it differently. And so you kind of are digging in, or you have a thought, they have a thought, they want you to go find out what the problem is, and so on and so forth. Or very classic is when they come and say, these numbers don't tie. The report is not working. Or the metric doesn't look right. So it's a bit overwhelming when you approach with that one-liner statement. It's overwhelming because number one, we are sensitive about what we produce. So if somebody comes back and says your numbers don't tie out, we immediately get very defensive. I get very defensive and I say, why? I mean, what did I do not right? Right? So it's not about right and wrong. It's about understanding that problem statement. But the reality is you have a huge brick wall in front of you. And what do? First, you take a deep breath, and then you break the problem down to many, many parts as possible. So how is that possible, right? So when they come back and say, give me the sales numbers for this year, inception to date, ITD, or month to date, believe it or not, it's worth understanding what sales means. Again, going back to several years ago, we had a requirement for a sales report. And I was like, yeah, no big deal. And what surprises most of us when you're starting off, now, of course, I mean, everyone knows better. If you've been in the industry for a while, you know better. But the definition of sales can be so remarkably different. You ask an accountant or a finance person what a sale is, it'll be very different from when you ask marketing or sales divisions. So it's key to understand who is asking for it, why are they asking for it, and what are they going to do about it? What is a decision that's dependent on it? If it's a salesperson that's asking for it, there is a term called gross sales. If there is a finance person asking for it, there's something called net sales. And even sales depends on when you book that sale, right? So I'm just using that one example. But it's definitely worth your time in understanding what those business measures are. What are those business metrics they're asking for? What defines them? So in order to answer these questions, we need to ask questions so that you can address that answers as quickly as possible. So what's the harm in just shooting in the dark and producing something? The problem is that very soon business users are so eager to get their hand on data, right? So they pick up that data and it circulates in no time. And people hang on to that. And if it is misreported data, it can do a lot of harm. That's very difficult to undo. So it's better to do it right. It's not going to be 100% accurate. Anytime in data, when you're pulling up analysis data, it's never going to be 100% right. However, you aim for at least 80%. And so you can do. Another thing is cycle. When you talk about sale booking, when do you book your thing? Some people do it, some units will do it, business units will do it calendar time, some will do it at their accounting time. And so it's worth kind of figuring all that out. Once you have understood that problem and breaking it apart, what do? You build it up from smaller pieces. So in order to do that, you understand that whole business to data flow, the whole end-to-end, or some call it order to cash, from the time your order comes in to the time it goes out into the market and to the time you get back revenue and you book it. That's a whole end-to-end process. Understanding it helps you to understand how the data elements flow. Where does it go? How does it transform? So a product transforms from business unit to business unit. It goes from process to process. It actually takes shape. So depending on who is asking you for these things, it really helps you to know what part of that process are they interested in. Where is the source of this data? Is that from CRM? Is that from the data warehouse? Or is it from a downstream application? Where is it that they are looking for it? It's also possible that they are actually spread out in all three or many systems, but they originate in one, or one of it is a system of record. So it's important to know that. It's also important to know what are the different elements you need to pull for your analysis. And very often, these are all spread out as well. So you may not have one source that you're looking for. You may have to pull some from here, some from part B, some from C. So you need to pull all that together and find out if all this addresses a problem. How do you do that? By constant communication with the business, and not just one user, but several of them. And therefore, we are, this is a very short thing that I wanted to present, but present at a high level. When you have a problem, you divide it. You understand the small atomic parts. So what makes up that problem statement? Break it apart, find out, identify the source, the right source for each of them. How do you do it? Again, by constant communication with business and several users. It's not going to be one shot digging into the database and pulling data out. Bring them together, not it one at a time. And what I mean by that is pull all the required elements into a lake, and you piece them together into one huge solution that comes up with this beautiful end product.
Right. That was awesome.
Yes.
Thanks, Anandi.
Thank you.
Thanks, Anandi. Yes, awesome. Thank you. All right. So I guess keep this show going. Again, if you have any questions for Anandi, please feel free to drop them in the chat and we will relay them to her. Also, I think we're going to try to drop the meetup link in the chat. So if you haven't went out to our meetup site and signed up to get future announcements of virtual meetings that we may have, please feel free to do that and keep in touch. And I guess without further ado, I'll introduce Andy Parkerson. He will be talking about Azure Functions, plugging holes in Azure Data Factory. So Andy, if you want to go ahead. You are on mute.
Thank you. Thank you,
You're
everybody.
welcome.
So I'm Andy Parkerson at not andyparkerson.com. That'd be great. At andyparkerson@gmail.com. I'm going to talk tonight about Azure Functions and plugging holes in Azure Data Factory. I get paid a nickel every time I say the word Azure, so I'm going to say Azure a whole bunch of times. Before we do that, I thought that we would try. I just found out about some interesting tech that they have in YouTube. So I want you to think about what color I am thinking of. And on your screens or on your phones, if you're watching this on mobile, I want you to click blue or orange. I want you to click one of the boxes, whichever one you think of. I'm going to give you a couple of seconds here. It's not going to give you any kind of feedback. It's just going to know, and I'll see the results. We'll give you a few more seconds. Everybody's clicked on it. All right. So it looks like 27% of you said blue, 73% of you said orange. Yeah, actually, it was green that I was thinking of. That's great. And this was really stupid. So to calm you down, there's this view. If this doesn't calm you down and make you think of a nice, peaceful place, then I don't know what will. So back to things. An Azure function, if you are not familiar with Azure Functions, Azure Functions are serverless functions that exist on Azure. They allow you to create sort of an API on demand. You write the function, Microsoft has the computers that actually serve it up for you. So you don't have to worry about how much memory is it going to have, what kind of processors is it going to have, what's all that stuff. You just write the code, Microsoft does everything else. You can choose multiple languages, PowerShell Core, .NET Core, Node, .js, Python, Java, anything that you want, as long as it's one of those, you can do. And it's pay as you go, so it doesn't have any cost. If you don't hit this endpoint, it doesn't cost you anything. If you do hit the endpoint, it does cost you something. I created one earlier today. A real quick .NET example. I said, create me a HTTP trigger, and it did all of this. It created all of this right there. So right away, it has given me an endpoint that I can go to that actually works. I can get the function URL up here on the top, get function URL. And if I do that and I go to it, I have the following thing. So you all can go on your own computers. You got a second screen. You can go to brssug-test.azureWebsites.net/API/brssug-hello. And you will get this. And you can type in name equals whatever your name is and get a personalized answer. This is just sort of their hello world right out of the box. But just with a few mouse clicks, you get this. It's already coded there. It's already coded for you. It already has the framework allowing you to do whatever it is you want to do. So that's what an Azure function is. Let's talk about Azure Data Factory. Azure Data Factory is ETL on the cloud. If I knew more about SSIS, I would say it's SSIS on the cloud, but I don't know anything about SSIS, so maybe. It is a codeless process. It's not code-free, but it's codeless. There are still some things that you have to know, still some code that you have to write, but very, very little. It's all, it's almost all GUI. It also is pay as you go. So you run this factory to do all your ETL, to load up your data warehouse, and then as soon as that's done, you stop. You don't pay anymore. You spin up your server. Azure spins up their server to do whatever you want it to do. It does it, and then you move along. And it's also rapidly developing. They're adding more and more stuff every day. They're tweaking the UI every day. Things look a little bit different every time I log in. It's glorious. They're very wonderful on feedback. Here's sort of an idea of what it looks like. This is a simple little pipeline that we have to get budget numbers from one place, do a little modifying of them, and then run a stored procedure on SQL, copy the data, and then write that data to an SFTP server. This is just sort of what it looks like. Unfortunately, ADF does not do everything you want it to do. It would be nice if it did, but it doesn't. They're rapidly developing it, and you can't rapidly develop the whole thing at once. You are agile. So one of the three things that I have found lacking is its handling of SOAP APIs. REST APIs, they got it great. Everybody likes REST APIs. It's the wave of the future. But the wave of the past is SOAP APIs. They're still out there. There's still a billion of them. And you still have to reach to them every once in a while and get what you need. Another thing it does not do natively is querying Power BI data sets. That's what I do a whole lot, is I am a Power BI guy. Over in the Baton Rouge Analytics user group, the Baton Rouge Analytics and Intelligence Network, gobrain.org, we do Power BI all the time, and Tableau and Alteryx and all other kind of things. I, in my professional life, do a lot of Power BI. And so it's very useful to query Power BI data sets, something that ADF cannot do natively. It also does not handle non-standard webhooks. Most standard things are not going to handle non-standard things. one of the webhooks, and the ones that I ran into are the Slack webhooks. It does not handle correctly, according to me. So I'll go you through these 3 examples of how you can use Azure Functions to solve these ADF shortcomings. First one are the SOAP API. You can choose any language you want to. I chose PowerShell Core because I find that PowerShell Core, you get the most bang for your buck. You have to learn, you have to know as possible, and you can write usable code. PowerShell Core has so much already built in, and the structure is so very straight up forward that you don't have to dig into the language a lot to just start writing it. .NET Core, you got to know a whole bunch of things. Python, you have to know a whole bunch of things. Java, you have to know a whole bunch of things. PowerShell, you have to know nothing. You have to know how to use Google or Bing. So they're the big things you want to look at here. The 2 PowerShell core functions that are interesting here are invoke web request and new as data lake gen 2 item. So invoke web request is the PowerShell curl. If you're familiar with that, it just sends out an HTTP request. It sends out a put or a get or a push or a put, whatever kind of HTTP request you have. It sends it out, it gets a response. Azure Data Lake, new Azure Data Lake Gen 2 item will create a new Azure Data Lake Gen 2 item. It will create a file in your data lake. So what I have is, here's some code that I wrote for this. I saw some code that people have done earlier on live streaming, and it's not the best way to present code. So I'm just going to move through this rather quickly. It will be on my thing. One thing you can see, if it's not too blurry, if I'm not too low, is here we get some items, we write the items. One of the nice things, let me go back here real quick, is that you can do interesting stuff like strip the top in. So if your data file has a header on it, that's not the column names, but it's, here's your report, from August 3rd. And the second line is the report on August 3rd. And the 4th line is from Microsoft. And the 5th line is from this. And it has 6 or 7 different lines at the top. You can use this to strip out the lines. This is just standard PowerShell stuff. It doesn't get too interesting in there. But what this does is I was unable to take a file, strip out the headers, unzip it, and then copy all of those files onto a Azure Data Lake place, which I could then pick up and go to my next step. So this allowed me to do that. I hope that people really appreciate the Robert Guillaume and can realize why he is on my SOAP portion of the evening. I'm just going to assume that everybody's laughing at everything funny I say. It works out better that way. So this pipeline was fetching Bing Ads API. I submit my request for a report. I wait until it's done. And then with that URL that they give me, I call my Azure function. It fetches the zip, it unzips it, and it writes it to a data lake. Without this, I could not do it through here. So there was a big hole. Because of the headers was really the worst part about it. That's what got me there. The next thing was querying Power BI data sets. This came about because I had a data set of dates, and I didn't want to have dates for the future. It didn't make sense for me to have dates for the future in my data set. But I wanted to know, every time I run this process to populate my data set, it's a push data set, every time I run this process, I want to know what's the latest date that's in there, what's the latest date I have data for, and let me put in all the other dates. So that was a use case for this. We had to use .NET Core. We tried several other things, This uses libraries, and that's one of the greatest things. You use all the .NET Core libraries are built in to this with an asterisk there, meaning probably not all of them, but a lot of them are there. It's very useful. The one that I really cared about was ADOMD command. And you can use that to query. You're basically using the analysis services libraries to tap into that because Power BI is analysis services. And in fact, you can see right here, you're using Microsoft Analysis Services ADOMD client. And this runs through and hits up my XMLA endpoints automatically through the .NET libraries, gets my information. I pass it a query string. I say, hey, here's my DAX query string. Evaluate this. It goes from there, evaluates it, and pulls it all right back down. Very nice, very helpful to have all of that built in. I didn't have to hit up the XMLA endpoints myself. I didn't have to figure out how is that done, how is that wired. I said .NET has a library for that, so all I have to do is have my .NET function call that, invoke that library, and then use that. The reason why I explicitly needed an Azure function for this is that I don't work in a .NET shop. So if I'm going to use .NET, if I'm going to have a .NET solution, the only way is going to be with one of these serverless apps. All right, the last one is non-standard webhooks. In fact, it's a Slack webhook. I used PowerShell again because it's not a very fancy thing. I didn't need a fancy library, so we have that web request, and I didn't actually write this, so that was wrong. But the way that Azure handles webhooks, the way that ADF uses webhooks, is that they will send out a webhook. In case you don't know what a webhook is just sort of a built-in curl endpoint. Say, hey, fire off this information with this payload and be done with it. Azure wants to hear back. Azure doesn't like to be left hanging. Azure wants that call back the next day. Slack, when you hit up the endpoint, Slack doesn't tell you anything. So I wanted to say when something was done, and if it failed or succeeded, to hit up my Slack webhook, and Slack wouldn't reply and say, hey, I got you. I heard you. Everything's good. So what I had to do was, instead of hitting up Slack directly, I hit up my Azure function. I say, hey, Azure function, I want you to tell Slack to do this. And then please let me know if you told Slack to do that. The Azure function does that. It grabs the callback URI, which comes from Azure Data Factory. It creates a response. And then as soon as it's done, fires it off, and it says, okay, let's invoke that web request. Let's fire off that hook back to the callback URI and tell them that everything happened. Either it worked or it didn't, but it lets them know. And so here is our 20,000 foot view of our pipeline here. We populate dimensions. If it doesn't work, then it alerts me to a failure through Slack. If everything does work, then it alerts me to a success. So Azure Data Factory, the orange is failure, the green is success, and the blue is completed. So I populate dimensions. If that doesn't work, still go ahead and populate facts, and then go on and hit my Slack for that. All right, well, thank you all so much for going through that. I wanted you to say one more time what happens when you hit a wall ADF. Just because it's not there doesn't mean it can't be done. You just have to find another way. So these Azure functions are great at finding another way. You say, hey, I need to do this. It would be great if I could do this. Well, let me do a little code in my codeless ADF and plug that hole. Because you had to suffer through that. Here's the cutest animal in the whole wide world, the pangolin. Isn't that cute? And here's the second cutest animal. Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate it. I'm Andy Parkerson, andyparkerson@gmail.com. And I appreciate talking with you all.
Awesome. Thanks, Andy. We appreciate it. And where can they find out more about the analytics group?
You can go, I'll put a link in the chat. It is gobrain.org.
Brain.org. Awesome. When do y'all meet?
We meet on the fourth Thursday of the month, usually. Because of the summer and pandemic and all of that, it's been a little bit erratic, but we try to go the fourth Sunday of the month. Fourth Thursday of the month.
Awesome. And I see we got your link posted in the chat, and I don't see any questions for Andy. Let me check Discord. Anything? Nope. Okay. Awesome. Well, first, let me give a big thanks to our speakers. Really appreciate y'all helping us do this, being patient with us while we're getting you on board into obviously Teams and getting the stream set up. We appreciate the content that you delivered as always. And if y'all are ever bored and want to speak again, feel free to reach out. We'll be more than happy to broadcast your face to
broadcast your face
to the thrones and a wild Bedford appears. Awesome. Again, also I'd like to thank Bedford for
round of applause for Bedford.
I'm down.
I don't know what the experience was for the people watching on YouTube, but from my point of view, things went very well. I'm not gonna lie, I did not have high hopes, but you executed. It was fantastic. So I would like to thank you for that. Also, be sure find us social media. Our websites, brssug.org, brdnug.org, gobrain.org. We need them to come up with our URLs, so that way it's easier to say. You can also find us on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn. Our meetup link has been posted. That is probably the best way to keep track of what we're doing, where we're going to be. Let's see. Don't forget Houston Tech Fest this weekend. If you'd like to see more of William, apparently you will see a lot of him. So
really, just this much.
Really, well, I mean, let's see. We'll work on that. Anybody else have anything?
Anandi,
thank you.
Do you want to plug
I really
anything?
enjoyed it. Yeah. So thank you so much.
Good job, everybody.
What's that, Bedford?
Oh, Anandi took it. I was gonna say if she wanted to plug anything in the Texas area, anything that she wants to announce, you have the platform. If you need anything, let us know.
Sure.
If you want to.
So Houston Tech Fest, free to attend. It's just like a SQL Saturday, but it's very broad.
Yes.
Houston Tech Fest, back before Hurricane Harvey, was like a 1,500 person event, but of course now it's all online. So we'll see, but it should be a pretty big deal. They have a lot of speakers.
Awesome.
Is
any of it going to be broadcast, or is it all?
It's all online, all broadcast. It's all via Teams.
You need a link for that.
And it's free to register to attend.
Nice.
Oh yeah, I should probably put a link out there for Houston Tech Fest.
Put a link to Houston Tech. I just got my link capability, so I've been slacking.
I gave you all the power.
Also, don't forget Discord. We are trying to grow our community. We want everybody to come and join, hang out, ask questions, network. Networking has always been a big thing to us, and we're going to try to facilitate that as best we can in our new virtual environments.
I'm always in there.
Yeah,
I'm always in there.
This time too. Our call for speakers is always open. So if you want to roll the dice and give this a shot, reach out to any one of us through any of these platforms, and we'll be more than happy to help you accomplish your dreams of becoming a YouTube star. We have several people now who are well on their way, and we have a producer. He is out for hire. Donations go to the Baton Rouge user group. No, I'm just joking.
Wait, Bedford, do you want to do the click and subscribe thing?
I'm gonna need you all to
it's your honor.
Smash that like button, subscribe, And ring a ding 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 that that bell for notifications. And it's your boy.
Well rehearsed.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's funny because he's done it flawlessly for the past 2 weeks on every test. So you put the man on camera and he buckles.
Chokes.
Uh-huh.
All right, everyone.
All right, everybody.
Thanks for
Have a good
coming.
evening.
Y'all have a good
Great.
Awesome.
night.
Thank you.
Thank y'all so
Bye-bye.
much.
Good meeting you all.